The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hello, everyone. This is Cindy Hubert with APQC. Thank you so much for joining us this morning. Well, it's morning my time. I looked at our list, and my goodness, some of you must be up in the middle of the night, so I do appreciate that, and hopefully you'll find this interesting, relevant, and a little bit entertaining, all in the same thing. So I'm here to talk to you a little bit about knowledge management, specifically APQC's capability assessment tool that we use that aligns with our maturity model and helps organizational programs, either at the enterprise level or business unit level, evaluate themselves against a set of capabilities and benchmark and get some comparative and data that they can take and do something with their programs. And here's what I'd love for you to do for me. As I get started, some of you are very new to me, so I'm assuming you're new to APQC and to this assessment tool itself. So what I'd like for you to do is use the chat feature or raise your hand. And I want to hear a little bit about what you're interested in, what you would like to do with this assessment tool. I mean, obviously, the first thing that comes to me is you need to evaluate and get some benchmarks. But what we have found over the dozen or so years that we have utilized this assessment is that people use it for a variety of reasons. There's a lot of benefits and a lot of ways that you can use it and apply it to advance your KM program. So let me know what that is and what your interest is. So as we go through the early part of this presentation, we can begin looking at these questions and I can really focus in on what we're doing. So what our agenda is today, I'd like to just tell you about the tool itself, what we have done in terms of recognition to recognize KM programs that have achieved higher levels of capabilities. And then I'll give you a little bit of background about how it does align to the maturity model, what you get when you actually take it, and then I'm going to land into the value and the benefits, because I think those are two of the most important things that we do. And here to help me, she's always my co-pilot is Zakia Ellis. She hates it when I point her out. Luckily, she doesn't have to put herself on screen, but thank you, Zakia, for being here. Okay, everyone, so let me spend just a little bit of time. Something happened this year, and it started last year, that we got very excited about, and we decided to take this capability tool and assessment and take it more public. We have been doing this, as I said, for about 12 years. And what we have found is that we being APQC, have had a lot of learnings from looking at what organizations are doing to achieve excellence in KM across their capabilities. And we have a lot of people who said, share that. Well, we do. We put it into case studies and best practices and all types of things that come out of APQC's knowledge base. But we decided to take it one step further and do a big public recognition, global recognition. And so we did that this year. We recognized organizations who either at the business unit or enterprise had achieved a maturity level of 3, 4, and 5. And I'm going to tell you a little bit about what that means as we get through this this web event. But with that, we've got a lot of value added. I'll talk a little bit about that and those people, but we're also taking entries right now. For us to be able to recognize you, number one, you have to give us your data. So and you do that by way of the capability assessment tool, and it's open to all of our members and to all of those that are our future members. So you are able to take that, go through our process that I'll explain, and then we'll be recognizing those recipients for 2020 next year at our annual Knowledge Management Conference, which happens to be, drumroll please, our 25th. We're very excited about that. So that's just to give you a little bit of PR about the award. But let me get into, first let me show you who actually achieved this award in 2019. This great group of organizations. It's 13 of the best KM programs in the world, we believe. you'll see that under the business unit level, we had Bupa Health Insurance, MRSA, NextEra Energy, their power generation division, Royal Dutch Shell. The U.S. Army Corps of Engineers had 5 divisions that received that recognition. And then on the enterprise, we had 4, Grant Thornton, Emphasis, Schlumberger, and the U.S. Internal Revenue Service. So as you can see, it's quite a diverse group using the same set of capabilities, benchmarking themselves, benchmarking against their peers and others, best practice. And so we're very proud of these. Just a distinction for you, because people always say, well, what's the difference between the business unit and the enterprise level? The difference is that there's no difference in how you take the assessment tool. The capabilities are the same. The difference is your scope, the investment, and where knowledge management sits in your organization. So obviously for the enterprise, that means that those organizations have capabilities that people are able to use across and consistent across the entire enterprise. The business unit is more focused on a particular division, group, region, whatever, however they have defined it as they give us their information and going through this assessment. So just that there's no difference. It just sometimes KM programs start with a much more focused effort and expand. Some start at the enterprise. There's no right or wrong in this, but it just lets you say you can use this assessment and benchmark yourself against them all. So very proud of these, and round of applause. So this assessment, it's very important for you guys to understand the KM maturity model that this assessment supports. I think the most interesting thing about this entire model is what happens on the far left-hand side, and that is your knowledge, because most of us that have been supporters of knowledge management for years, that have been in the field, what we're doing this for is the number one strategic asset of your organization, and that is knowledge. Regardless of the form it comes in, tacit knowledge, explicit knowledge, expertise, great content, data, it all comes under there. And our APQC's definition of knowledge management is very broad. We do believe that when you get into data management, information management, content management, a set of the same capabilities are required, but there may be more rigor around certain processes like review and validation, and there's a different rigor that comes for content than there may be for expertise, because that's more tacit, it's hard to get out of people's heads, and you may look for more collaboration, mentoring, apprenticeship over time to help that deep knowledge flow. So there's a lot of approaches that go to support all of this. As you move across then from left to right, you can see this model is built on 5 standard levels, from initiate up to innovate. Those are just our high-level labels that go on the levels. But what you can see is what actually happens as you move through the levels. So we do not expect a lot at level 1. We see organizations who reside there for years because there are things that happen that you just do intuitively. People say, oh, we have great knowledge processes built into our work processes. Great. If that's the case, then I would expect you to meet a lot of the capabilities of level 2, because that is when you start having repeatable practices and knowledge is built into the workflows. What happens at level 3 is that you begin to see more common KM processes and approaches that people are using consistently built into the flow of work. And they're standardized, and typically they're supported by some type of group, whether that be a central KM team, a core group, a community that looks across an enterprise in a federated model. As you get to level, why do you want to get to level 3? There's a lot of reasons. One is it feels better. You have more consistency. There's probably a much more efficient program being run for knowledge management at a level 3 than the level 2. Let me explain that to you. At level 2, you get a little bit seduced by that level because everybody is sort of doing their own thing. There may be different platforms, different ways to use communities, lessons learned, deep knowledge transfer, whatever approach you're using, and you get very comfortable with that. What may be happening, again, is over on the left side. You may be applying your knowledge, but you may not be getting the best knowledge that you have across the enterprise. It may be stuck in some silo, a business group, a community, and it's not being lifted up and scaled across the enterprise for other uses in similar or different contexts. And what happens is you start being able to do that. You see what happens at level 5. You start the innovation process. And that's why people, once they get to level 3, because we say, great, the other reason is you're getting about a 2-to-1 return on your investment, which is nothing to sneeze at. As you get up, though, and begin the innovation, you begin to realize the power that knowledge has, and that if you have really great processes that flow and you've really identified your critical knowledge, you're able to utilize that to do some things very strategic to the business and in supporting your business. We have data to support all of this. This is just a little bit of that data. This is based on some research that we did. We looked at about almost 300 of our data sets that came in based on the mature assessment. We call the report, and for those of you that are APQC members, you can go download that report. It's called the Accelerators of KM Maturity. And what we see is that people who do spend some time constantly benchmarking, assessing where they are, identifying gaps, closing those gaps, we see a lot of really good value. One is you are more likely to embed KM in the core business processes, which is a very important thing to achieve level 3 and beyond. You also begin to enhance and improve those, so you just don't stay with the status quo. I laughed, one of our members at our KM conference, I said, oh yeah, you've got to sustain. And she said, Cindy, if you're sustaining in these days, you're dying. You have to constantly innovate and evolve. And I absolutely agree with that. But this is getting you started. What also happens is you find with all of the advanced technologies, the AI, natural language processing, the move that everybody seems to be doing, or a lot of people are doing, to Office 365 to have more collaborative capabilities, search capabilities, you're able to really embrace those and build those in to enable your knowledge processes and let that happen. Then, of course, as you begin to do that, creating that formal business case that showcases what is happening as knowledge management supports the business is so important. You can start being very predictable and begin to get into some more data and knowledge analytics to help you understand where you need to go. So these are just a few of the benchmarking and assessment benefits. There are more. Let me tell you just a little bit about, and we have some questions, so you guys please keep them coming. I promise I'm going to slow down and take them, and we'll have a conversation. Let me, again, one more piece of data for you. We knew this mattered back when we had started the capability in the early 2000s and built this with a group of our members. We knew there was a lot to it, and this was actually some work that was done by Dr. Mike Yokel, who looked at KM maturity and outcomes. He compared it against return on assets and return on sales. And you can see his data showed that there was 2 times better financial performance with higher knowledge management maturity. Well, as you can imagine, this offered a very exciting thing for us back in 2010, and that's why we've continued to work and promote and get people to use this tool to support their KM program. Just a couple of slides about taking the assessment, because I think that's always on top of mind. It's not a 15-question, check the box, yes or no, and here's where you are assessment. It is built around 4 different categories of capabilities. There's 12 of them under each of these 4 categories. And across the levels 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, there's a total of 146 capabilities. And when you start taking it, obviously it's like a thermometer. So you'll see level 5 at the top, but we say go down. It's Excel based. And I'll show you that shortly. We'll go to it if you'd like to see it. And we always suggest starting with your level 1 because that's the easier things to to complete and to understand and work your way up. And it's almost like a thermometer for each one of these categories and capabilities. You begin to see yourself, you may have, nailed level 1 and you've completed that. You've got some really good things going on level 2. Oh, and you've got some good level 3 and perhaps some level 4 things in place. So you start bouncing around. It's a very uneven bar. And the goal is as you're marching to level 3 is to get all of those capabilities in order, because they all work off each other, they all play. Now, there are some that are drivers of the other. Number one driver, and especially at level 2, when we looked across our 13 programs that we recognized and beyond, the business case was the number one driver for getting you from level 2 to level 3. And that tends to hold true as you expand your KM program and scale. You constantly need to be able to say what the value proposition is and how it's supporting your business. The second thing that, and it would not surprise you, is measurement. Because if you are measuring, even if it's through stories and quantifying your stories of cycle time reduction, better productivity, cost benefit, cost avoidance, those are all very good early indicators that your program is needed, that the processes are needed, and you can get a lot of lift from that as you start building. And then, of course, the third thing we see is the change, engaging, getting people to participate in your programs. Those are so important because without, it's the fuel for a KM engine. If you can't get people participating, you got a great set of tools and processes that nobody's using. So it makes sense. I do not think you can ignore the impact that technology is having on our business processes, all the way from rapid process automation. And I do think that there is so much value to be had by really looking at the beginning, if some of you are just getting started, how the new capabilities can be used to leverage and build knowledge processes. Now, you will not get away from the processes and people. It's still number one, but I do think that information technology can give you such a great vision and make things easier when you start putting in your capabilities. For example, if you're really focused on explicit knowledge content, you've got a content strategy, don't ignore the fact that there's some great AI technologies out there, artificial intelligence technologies, that can help you do auto tagging and organize your unstructured data into taxonomies. That is so helpful as you begin then building out your processes and putting people in roles and getting the right skills in place to support all of that. Last thing to show you, and we'll take a few questions then, is just what you get back. Now, this is a very high-level view. It almost looks elementary. You get a much more complex report back. This is showing you just one of the many, many charts and graphics and data that you get back. But looking at your organization as compared to all participants, all data sets, a peer group, people who may be in your region, people of your size. We have all kinds of ways that you can cut your peer group by industry. And it'll give you a great report that not only gives you this comparison, but then also show you where your gaps are and where you might need to focus and support those gaps. We go through a very rigorous process to get here. I'll take you to our website in just a second to show you how you can get started if you haven't seen that already. But let me get to the benefits and some questions. And I'm going to put this slide up as our backdrop. I said earlier, why are you all on this call today, especially some of you who are up late on a Friday night? I hope you're having a glass of wine or something wonderful. Yeah, so look, you got to think of, I want you to do this for obvious reasons. We think that this is fast becoming a global standard for knowledge management. That's our vision for this. Our vision for you is that it's useful. So if you're just getting started, it'll help give you some direction of where you need to go and focus your efforts. It will also help you identify where you have capabilities that you can link to and leverage. If you're down the path some and you're at level 2, you have to do this. You've got to audit and look across all those localized efforts, see what you're doing, because if you want to move to level 2, you've got to bring some of those together. It doesn't mean that you're going to standardize people's knowledge. That has never been our goal. Knowledge is unique. It's different for everyone. Business leaders have to be involved with your knowledge strategy, pointing you to what is critical, what needs to flow, what they need to retain, what's going to be leaving. But as a KM leader, you have to understand what processes and approaches you want to bring together that can give you that more consistent view across ultimately your enterprise. So you can get the best knowledge to go, or people can find and discover where that knowledge is very easily, so you're not reinventing the wheel and doing redundant activities, because that's the wastefulness that happens. If you are at level 3, you got to hang on, right? You got to make sure that you are evolving and things are happening different. And this is where at level 3, measurement really solidifies your position in the organization, and it begins to help you with coming to the strategic table of the organization. So yes, KM will always have to improve, always be efficient, but this is about taking what you guys do so well to deal with the problems the business is having, to deal with supporting those strategies, to creating something smart that people can use across the enterprise that drives your business. And so that's what this is all about. And I'm anxious to hear. I think we may have had a few questions.
We've got one question that has come in.
Great.
I can go ahead and share that one. What if an organization is large enough to have varying units operating at different stages of KM maturity?
Oh, very good. I don't know who said that, but I'm telling you this. That's what I just said. At level 2, you need to use this and start bringing things together. Now, let me caution you. You're not just going to change people at local levels. They don't like to. They feel really good. What you can begin to do with this awareness is draw attention to redundancies in KM. Because and guys, I've seen this. I will tell you, I really have. KM programs can become very inefficient and cost so much. You're doing all these things in the name of KM. Well, guess what? You got to have resources to do that. And you may be able to free up a lot of resources that you can really get back into the business to add value to support knowledge flow if you go to a more consistent processes and approaches. So use it as a tool to bring all that together. It will take you a little bit longer to go through the assessment because there will be a lot of data to collect, and you'll have to go into thinking about this as a project to say, how will we go collect this data? And usually we start that off with a focus group. We bring like-minded people together, those like-minded who understand KM, because your business people will typically not understand the capability even if they're using it. So it's up to the KM core group or advocates to interpret that, and the statements are built, and I'll show you some in just a second. They're built to be very broad in their interpretation. We did that on purpose. We modeled after CMM and CMMI out of Carnegie Mellon. We looked at the Malcolm Baldrige National Quality Assessment because those have worked throughout the years.
I have another question.
Yeah.
What type of evidence do organizations use to show they have standardized methods or strategies, and how do they track and measure?
Good question. So what type of evidence do people have to track and measure? Well, number one, you're probably looking, this tool will give you that evidence. It is very much an evidence-based assessment that goes through a rigorous data collection that you do, a scoring, a validation, and deep detail with APQC before the reporting ever happens. But I think when you look at evidence, if you look at some of the programs that have really evolved over the years and have continued to grow, I think a lot of the evidence comes from just the outcomes and the impact that they've had on the business, and they've had the business engaged with them, so they create what we call value paths at APQC, where they're able to identify a set of KM capabilities and knowledge processes that are embedded or applied to a standard set of business processes or a function or perhaps even a domain that then yields some type of an output and an outcome. And what they've done is been able to find measures that support all of that. And in fact, that's such a good question. I'll go ahead and show you 3 organizations that have actually done that. And if you look, what they were able to do, just what I described, they started out with the business need in the second column. And these organizations, Fluor, Schlumberger, and Merck, have been working with their programs for years, but they always have very defined needs of the business and what they're focusing on. And if you look at how they go through the sort of the logic of if we apply these approaches and they work well and enable them with technology, we are able to get to some very good results that people pay attention to, right? Whether it's saving a client dollars on a project, taking less time to dissolve queries, which you could carry that through and say you're probably getting some type of savings as well. Actual ROI that Schlumberger measures through their InTouch program, or even Merck with their reductions in avoidance of capital improvement performance. Those are huge. And when knowledge flow happens, that's an ability to show that evidence. And I will tell you all, that's my favorite. I think when you supplement that with this capability assessment and really look at how the efficiency is being worked, that's a good thing too. The third part of that 3-legged stool, so business outcomes, KM, the assessment of KM capabilities and their maturity. The third one is KM benchmarks. And guys, if you didn't know it, I don't have it on the slide here, but you can go online. We have knowledge management benchmarks. And you can benchmark yourself and look at, the total cost of a program, resources that support a certain number of population in your organization, the number of approaches people have. It's a very detailed benchmarking report. As a member, you can get those benchmarks. You can also give us your data, and we're getting ready, hopefully, to go through back through another big data collection effort to get refreshed data, but it's very fresh. We just rolled it out last year, and people are really utilizing that. So that will give you evidence that you need as well. So I know for that, again, I want to come back to this, and again, give me your chat. I'd love to know what is keeping you up in the middle of the night or why you've taken some time off from your day job, if this is outside of your day job, to join me today. Let me show you, I'm going to take you to APQC's website where we have the capability assessment. And you can, again, this is on our public website that you can get to. This tells you a little bit about what I have just shared with you. And this is where you can begin your journey. So thank you. You've joined us for the monthly call. These are our office hours. This one is a video that actually helps you understand how to complete the capability assessment. And then we have a sample report, as I said, that would be a lot of detail underneath that. There's a lot of things that you can, get through this. We actually do have, just so you know, a mini assessment. If some of you are on the line that just are saying this is just the formality of knowledge management is an early thought for our organization, this is a fun little short assessment that you can take and it's 15 questions, yes and no. So that's easy. It takes just a few minutes to do. The assessment, the capability assessment, takes a little bit longer. We have another question? Anything?
We actually do.
Okay, let me do that before I show them the tool itself.
Well, I think this is just a comment. You talked about the day job.
Yes.
And this person is saying that comment is key. There's a question in it. How do we explain to individual line workers and managers who are very busy why an investment in KM mindset and practices are going to specifically help them versus the organization as a whole in their immediate goals and firefighting tasks?
Oh my gosh. Thank you for that wonderful question. So how do you get people to really pay attention to this? You know, I will tell you, there's so many ways, and some people get through this whole discovery phase of why do we need formal camps. Some people go really fast, and the ones that go fast, I will tell you this, tend to have had a problem where if they knew how to solve the problem, but because they didn't know they had already solved it in the organization, they did it all over again. And that discovery is one thing that tends to propel. So that's one. The second thing that seems to be a big driver, there's two more drivers, I think, in terms of how you get people to recognize, and then I'll talk about that day job. Number two is you may recognize that you've got a lot of experience leaving the organization, so knowledge retention becomes a big deal. You have some single points of failure where you've had experts who have been there 30, 40 years. They know how to do it. They've got all this deep, rich, tacit knowledge. They make it look effortless. And there's a business leader out there that sees that, oh my gosh, I'm not going to be able to replace this. And that's why a lot of people tend to get started in that scope of a business unit, a division, someplace smaller, because you can solve that problem more easily and put in early capabilities and recognize, and then begin to lift your head and look out along the way. The third thing that we're seeing today that's really getting people's attention around knowledge is the whole notion of innovation. People are recognizing, and we've gone through this pendulum, guys, you know that. People are recognizing once again that the structured innovation that we have in our organizations that tends to often reside in an R&D function or capability, it's not always the answer. There's all these good ideas. There are, business developers and sales and marketing people that are close to the client, that are hearing clients' needs and need to bring that back to enhance, your chemical products and build something that they need. There are people they're engineers that are working on things that if you just started bringing different mindsets together, your innovation and opportunities might explode. And knowledge management is the organization with the capabilities to do that, to convene people, to push people to content that they need, that they can use in different contexts, to connect to the experts, to search and discover. That's what CAIM is all about. That day job is an interesting thing, and I'm going to use this, if you don't mind, to show you. Let me get here. I want to show you a real key piece of the capability assessment. There it is. So interestingly enough, there's some interesting things in terms of resources. So this is just to give you, as I said, this is the tool itself. Let me just, in Excel base, for those of you who have not seen it, there's some very detailed instructions of how to take it. The video supports that. There are terms of agreement of taking it. And then the demographics is a very important page guide because it helps us then get you into a better peer group of comparison. So you can give us that and share that. And then it goes into each of the 12 capabilities and very detailed statements. So going back to resources, there's a couple of things that I think are really interesting when you start talking about how do I get people engaged in this. Number one, and this is a level 4 capability. Let me kind of show you this first. It says KM skills, if you can look at line 9, KM skills and capabilities are aligned with employee development. One of the things that people see very quickly, especially people in their early careers, or I love it, Lockheed Martin calls them next spurts. They're not experts, but they're next in line to be that expert. They're very interested in how they use collaboration, being moderators, developers of content for communities of practice, leading lessons learned to where they convene large groups around strategic projects. Those are all really important things to help them continue to develop and grow their career. So that's one of your value propositions that you see early on. Again, still under resources, these two level 3 pieces are very important in terms of making sure you have active champions and sponsors. Because if you started with your champion or sponsor, your manager, your VP, director, whoever it might be, love when the CEO takes notice because they can make a lot of people scurry. But that champion is very important to get engaged so you can get them to help you paint the picture of what this could look like. And usually you're solving their problems. That's most important. And what happens then is, and a lot of this you'll see for those of you who are at level 2 and say we got all kinds of things going on, you probably have a whole lot of people who are coordinating and managing knowledge flow processes. And I promise you it can be done more efficiently. So if you can recognize that and start pulling those people together and giving them a better way to work, processes that work better, that are consistent, you'll start getting people to really see some of the value proposition of doing this. Change management. So this is a couple of things here I think are very important in terms of people. As you guys start looking across and saying, what is it that our business need? And this is springboarding from what I just showed you in resources, because a lot of these capability statements overlap. They help us really understand your full picture, understand to say that, yes, we do have this and we can validate that you have these things as a capability. But one of these is having people embedded in the business. They're actually business people, but they advocate for KM. So their job may only be a 5 to 10%, here's what I do on a daily basis in terms of my knowledge management responsibilities. They report into the business, but they're supported by the KM program. And you can do that in a variety of ways. But they're the ones that are closest to the work. They're the ones that give you the best understanding of how your capabilities are working, what problems they're trying to solve, what knowledge looks like, and actually what the barriers are. And you'll see barriers are a level 3 capability under change management. And when you do these two things in conjunction, it is, again, very, very powerful because you begin to then push your hub and spoke model out to the business where they budget, they invest time, they want to skill their knowledge workers in being part of those knowledge processes and using the capabilities, the KM capabilities, to enable those knowledge processes that ultimately impact the flow of their work, the business process. So sorry to see you guys, that's a long-winded answer, but I thought it was interesting because you can begin to see how this works. Let me go down to the bottom of change. Change management, I love it. Susan Rosenbaum, who leads the program at Schlumberger, and just as a side note, Schlumberger was recognized as an enterprise level 4, but I want you to listen to this. They have 10 out of the 12 categories at level 5 capability. The way we score, you know, if it was all equal, you know, they're like a 4.6 or 4.8. But we score this, and this model is not meant to say, oh, you have to stay at the top of your game. It's to help be useful. And the scoring, while we love that and love to be able to say we're at that maturity level, it's to be taken into account and say, we're doing these things and they make sense for our business. For example, Schlumberger may not need the rigor of a level 5 measurement system. They just may not need it. But I assure you, at their change management, they're at level 5. So that's how you have to think about this, Jewel, and constantly put yourself back. But again, it starts at, you know, level 1. I said start here. A current state assessment, again, this does not mean it's the formality of this assessment, but you've just looked across and said we've got some problems, barriers, knowledge flow isn't happening. We've also looked at best practices. Wow, our industry is soaring and we're not. And we should get caught up because we've got to be able to compete. And knowledge is our competitive advantage. We need to be better at managing it and helping it flow. Managing the process is helping it flow. So as I said, you may come up here and, you know, check off some of these and say, yes, we've got this, Cindy. We've got this. you look at best practices. We've already got a plan in place to begin. I'll show you how this works. Oh no, we're not doing enough education and training. We haven't done a strategy. We have talked to our senior level managers. They're all on board. We don't have them here. We're not training yet. So you may stop there. You may have done this. Some people say, yeah, we know what our barriers are. We got them. So it is not unusual for you to submit and give us something that looks just like this for this particular category. Let me tell you what this means. You would have achieved a level 1 capability in change management because you still have some gaps in level 2. Once you have done these, and I will tell you this, a change management strategy is a key driver for change because it helps you get organized, and it's not just happening as a laissez-faire type activity. It is happening as a concerted effort to get people engaged, get people participating, and typically, let me connect the dots, our business case is one of those drivers that makes that happen. And so this now takes you to say, we've done the rationale, we've identified our key focus areas, our KM is focused with our business strategies and capabilities, our business needs. Whoops, maybe we didn't spend enough time really looking at the needs of the business as part of our KM strategy. I will tell you all, that makes your KM strategy a little hollow because I love KM, but I always call that KM above the flow of work. So I've seen brilliant systems that just would work beautifully. They're just pristine best practice, but because they're not integrated into the flow of how the business runs and how work happens, they're just a pretty picture, a pretty face. So you got to bring it down and align it to the business and build that into your strategy so you're showing what the needs are and how you're going to address them. I sound like I'm lecturing all of you. I am. My apologies. Any questions about, and I'm happy to open the lines. You guys, please raise your hand if you have anything you'd like to say. Or I appreciate the conversation. Zakiya knows I could talk for days just by myself. It's a terrible thing. You need two-way. Hopefully this does give you some good insights. As I said, once you complete this, you send it back. Our project manager for the capability assessment tool is Darcy Lemons. She receives this. If there's a place you send this back to, she receives it. She begins to look it over. Sometimes if she sees things just at a glance that are going to be problematic, before she begins the rigor of validation, she'll pop back to you. So we'll always ask for a point of contact so you can actually have someone to help us there to move you quickly through the validation and reporting process. But Darcy will go through with her team and do a very detailed validation of what you've shared with us. We don't mind acronyms, but you need to hand us a definition sheet if you do, because we don't know what all your acronyms are. And if you do give us acronyms without a definition sheet, I can promise you you're going to have a lot of red lines from Darcy because she doesn't know what those are. So feel free to use them. Just give us a definition sheet so we can go through.
Perfect. Cindy, I have a question. Is participation free for APQC members?
Absolutely. It's a complimentary. You get one a year with your membership. For those of you who are future members, it is $5,000 US to participate. And that goes in, again, for the validation piece, all the reporting. As I said, it's quite rigorous. But yes, you all use it. If you're one of those organizations that say, oh my gosh, Cindy, we need to go across, 12 business units, that's fine. And we can do a couple of things. One is we can get you set up and you can go make that happen, and a lot of people do. We also have services that support that if you should need it because of the time factor and just being able to collect the data you need. So scope is very important, and we'd like to have that conversation. Your member success manager at APQC, and you all have one, current and future members. You need to find out who they are because they'll call myself in, Darcy in, someone who can help you really shape and scope this so you don't waste a lot of time. I will tell you this, we get people who start it and don't finish it. So, and that's okay. You guys, you can take this tool and use it, but I will tell you the benchmarks and going through the entire process is really what is important. It is where you can. And, of course, we want to recognize your achievement if you are a 3, 4, or 5. Okay, with that said, I will take you all back. We are very excited that you all have joined us this morning. If you get into this and you have some challenges, you can either call us or we'll be doing this next month again, as it's our office hours, and we like to try to keep up with you all and not only spread what we're doing with it, but help you guys through that. So bring your problems to this. We're happy to work through them. And with that, Zakia and I will sign off. Thank you all.
Thank you so very much.